So I just told you one story about someone who did the right thing in the entire putting kids in internment camp situation, which was child detention center worker Antar Davidson quit his job when he was told he has to enforce a rule that prevents detained migrant siblings from hugging each other. I now have a story about someone doing the opposite of good in this entire fiasco, actually doing something completely horrifying. ProPublica got their hands on a secret audio recording of a Border Patrol agent joking around as kids from Central America were desperately crying when they were separated from their parents last week. There's the statistics which we hear about. Here's the number of people that are being detained, the number of kids being separated from their parents. And then there's the reality. And the reality I'm going to play for you here is absolutely horrifying. And you're going to hear Spanish being spoken for the people that are watching either on YouTube or on Free Speech TV or on our television affiliates. There will be translation on screen. But to preview what you're going to hear, the long and short of what's being discussed in Spanish here is that there are kids saying things like, I don't want him to deport my dad, where are my parents, things along those lines. This sort of sets the stage for us.
No quiero que me paren a mi papá, no quiero que lo deporten.
So it goes on like this. You don't really even need to speak Spanish to understand the gist of what's going on here. And then we get to the really funny jokes from a Border Patrol agent, again in Spanish, first saying, we have an orchestra here, meaning the crying of countless children separated from their parents, followed, a little more difficult to hear, by all we need is a conductor. Again, translation on screen for people who are watching.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta.
My correction, he actually said we're missing a maestro, not a conductor, but I think you sort of understand the general point of what he was saying. Empathetic, right? I mean, this isn't about this one guy, to be super clear. This guy actually, he sounds like a native Spanish speaker. This might be a Hispanic guy who actually does empathize with what's going on, but is completely desensitized because the system is really what the problem is. He's been conditioned to find this to just be another day on the job. And I've got to tell you, if the line doesn't get drawn here, where does it get drawn? And I'm not asking rhetorically. I'm actually asking, if we don't draw the line here and now, what is going to stop it from getting much, much worse? And we do have people who are increasingly furious about what's happening in our country. But we also have committed Trumpists who, in their sort of cognitive dissonance and collective delusion, are rationalizing each of these increasingly heinous policy acts of the administration, with few exceptions. I'll tell you about a Republican exception after the break. And they're going to support these increasingly extreme actions. So if the idea, Pat, is that we're going to say, listen, this is soul-crushing audio, everybody's going to realize it, and even the committed Trumpist will stand up and say, this is as far as we go with this stuff. I don't think it's going to happen. We've seen no evidence that that's going to happen.
Yeah, it probably won't, unfortunately. I also wonder whether it's the job that makes monsters out of these people, or if these people are attracted to these jobs because they can fulfill what they want to do, which is to be monsters themselves.
I think it's 50-50. I think the idea is that the way this works is individuals who are drawn to the sort of authoritarian position that you have as something like a Border Patrol agent are drawn to that. Sometimes they see, you have a lot of veterans, for example, in Border Patrol. Sometimes they see the similar type of hierarchy that exists in the military as appealing. And then once they're in, they get further sort of desensitized to some of the horrible realities of what's going on. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's probably a combination of the two. And, you know, whether you want to call it, do they lack a conscience? Do they lack a moral compass or whatever? I think it's far more complicated than that. I think that's very easy to just say these people have no conscience. I think that the horrors of what has been established as almost a mechanism of government is what normalizes it in this way, and it goes beyond good and bad people.
Yeah, I guess on the bright side, there are people who will take a stand, right? Like Antar Davidson told that he has to separate kids who are hugging, and he decided to quit. But you're right in the sense that someone else is just going to replace him.
That's the problem. Unless you deal with the underlying policy, if some people say, I'm not going to stand for this and leave, they will very quickly be replaced. And you need a much more sort of systemic upending of what it is that we're seeing here. After the break, I'll tell you about a Republican who's actually doing the right thing, kind of now, after doing the wrong thing for many, many months. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we'll be right back.